You don't always know when the betrayal starts. Sometimes it doesn't come with shouting or slammed doors. Sometimes it begins with a smile, a gentle tone, and a question that sounds like love, until you realize it was a setup. My name is Florence Brown. I'm 71 years old. And for nearly 4 decades, I lived in the same 2-bedroom apartment on the second floor of a modest building in Portland's Selwood neighborhood. We bought it in 1984, me and my husband, Nolan, for $95,000. Back then, it was a stretch, but we made it work. These days, the place is worth over $1 million. But to me, it's never just been about the money. It's the smell of the wood cabinets when the sun hits them just right. It's the quiet creak of the hallway floor I never got around to fixing. It's where Nolan and I built our life. And later, where I raised our son, Albert, after Nolan passed in '92. Albert was just 11 when Nolan died. A sudden heart attack. One moment he was laughing over a Sunday crossword, the next, gone. It was the hardest time of my life, but I held it together. I had to. I was a school librarian then, organizing books by day, helping Albert with his math at night, pinching every penny. We lived small, but we had enough. Now, so many years later, the apartment still feels like home. It's not fancy. The wallpaper in the kitchen is outdated, and the second bedroom turned into my sewing room years ago. But it's mine. I know where every crack in the wall came from. I know which step on the stairs to skip when it rains because it gets slippery. It's where life happened, where it still happens. I retired at 66. I keep busy. I walk to the cafe on Tacoma Street for my tea. I help out twice a week at the library where I used to work. I read. I tend to my balcony plants. I do just fine. Albert lives about 20 minutes away in Beaverton. He's 44 now, works in commercial insurance, married to a woman named Tilda. She's polite, the kind of person who never forgets to send a thank you text, but always feels like she's measuring you. They have one daughter, Ivy. She's 10, bright, sweet, still at that age where she hugs me with her whole body. Albert and I used to be close. When he was younger, he'd call me twice a week, sometimes just to tell me what he ate for lunch. But over the years, our calls grew shorter. Less about how I was doing, more about logistics, schedules, what Ivy needed, what Tilda wanted. Still, I never complained. Life changes. I understood. But then, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, the tone shifted. It started small. A few casual comments during Sunday lunch. Mom, this place must be a lot to keep up. Or, don't you ever get lonely in here by yourself? I brushed them off. I like the quiet. I'd say, it's peaceful. He nodded, but his eyes kept wandering around the apartment like he was sizing it up. Then came the pamphlets. Tilda dropped them off on her visits. Just some ideas, she'd say, slipping them onto my side table. Brochures for independent senior living communities. Studio condos in Hillsborough. Apartments in developments with names like Silver Oaks and The Pines at Morningview. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to start trouble, but I didn't throw them away either. I just put them in a drawer, out of sight. I thought maybe they were just being thoughtful. Maybe they were worried about me. Then Albert started talking about property taxes. Mom, have you seen how high they're getting around here? He said one Sunday, unprompted, while slicing a pear for Ivy. You could be paying so much less if you moved. I nodded but didn't answer. He pushed a little more each time. Brought up aging in place. Brought up how Beaverton was closer to Ivy's school. How I could see her more often if I lived nearby. How maybe it was time to rethink things. Each time, I told him the same thing. I'm doing fine where I am. But they didn't stop. One evening, when he came by alone, he sat across from me at the kitchen table, unusually quiet. He looked tired. worn down in a way I couldn't place. I poured him a cup of tea. He didn't touch it. "Mom," he said, "finally, have you ever thought about moving into something smaller?" That's when I felt it. Not just concern. Not just love dressed up as advice. Something else. Like a plan already in motion. I looked at him for a long time, longer than he expected, and I said, "Smaller for who?" He didn't answer, just smiled. I don't know what hurt more, his silence or the way he looked relieved when I didn't fight him on the spot. In that moment, I knew something had shifted between us. Not a break exactly, but a bend, like the frame of a house under pressure. Quiet, unseen, but there. And when something bends long enough, it either snaps back into place or it breaks. It wasn't long after that kitchen conversation that the check-ins started. Albert began stopping by more often, sometimes with Tilda, sometimes alone, always unannounced. They never stayed long, 20, 30 minutes at most, but they'd poke around, ask if I was eating well, sleeping enough, taking my blood pressure pills. Tilda once opened my fridge and frowned like something had spoiled, though all she saw was yogurt and leftover soup. Albert would glance at the carpet and ask if I'd thought about replacing it, said the loose threads near the doorway were a tripping hazard. Then he'd go on about how aging in place didn't mean staying in one spot forever. It meant adapting, being smart about what's next, he said. I nodded politely, but I didn't like the way he said, "What's next?" like it was already decided for me. Then came the emails. Tilda started forwarding me links. Listings from Zillow and private co-ops. Studio apartments in Gresham. One-bedroom units in a new retirement village in Hillsborough. The subject lines always read the same way. Just a thought. Cute place near Albert's office. Safe, clean, cozy. She never asked if I wanted to move. She just assumed I should. At first, I ignored them. Then I replied to one with a simple, "Thanks, but I'm not looking right now." 5 minutes later, I got a text from Albert. "You okay, Mom? Just trying to help you be safe and comfortable." Then another. "We love you. You know that, right?" Love. That word started showing up more when they wanted me to do something. Love doesn't need reminders every 5 minutes. Not unless it's being used as a cushion for something harder underneath. They came by one Saturday afternoon with Ivy in tow. Tilda handed me a reusable grocery bag with soup, fruit, and vitamins. Albert sat on the couch, flipping through mail on the coffee table, like he was looking for something specific. Then he cleared his throat. "Mom, have you ever considered a senior co-op?" he asked casually, like he was asking about the weather. I looked up from cutting an apple for Ivy. "No, can't say I have." "They're great." Tilda jumped in. "You have your own place, but there's staff on call. Activities, security, medical support." "I'm not sick," I said, "and I already have my own place." Ivy looked up from her iPad. "Mommy said you could live near us. That way we'd see you more." Tilda gave her a look, but it was too late. Albert smiled wide, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Wouldn't that be nice?" I forced a smile back and changed the subject. After they left, I went to the kitchen to put away the groceries. That's when I noticed the folder on the counter, one of those accordion-style ones with colored tabs. It wasn't mine. I opened it. Inside were real estate flyers, contact cards, and a handwritten list. I recognized the handwriting. It was Tilda's. Across the top of the list, estimated sale value, Florence's unit. Underneath, low, $925,000. High, $1.1 million. Next page, notes on comparable units in the building. Contact info for a local appraiser. A breakdown of studio options under $15,000 cash. I closed the folder and stared at it. Now, I wasn't just suspicious. I was sure. They weren't just thinking ahead. They were planning. That evening, I got a text from Tilda. Oops. I think I left a folder on your counter. Don't worry. It's nothing serious, just helping Albert get organized with some housing stuff. You can toss it. I didn't toss it. I placed it in my bottom drawer, beneath the sewing supplies I hadn't touched in years. I didn't say a word. Not yet. After that, things shifted. The visits slowed, but the pressure didn't. Albert began bringing up financial protections. You've worked hard your whole life, Mom, he said one night over the phone. We just want to make sure things are in place in case something happens. Emergencies. I have a will. I've got savings. I'm doing fine. I replied. Sure, but what if you fall? Or if something comes up medically? Having everything lined up now would save a lot of confusion later. Then, softer. I'd never let anything bad happen to you, right? That line hit me in the gut. It was what Nolan used to say when the mortgage was tight or the car needed repairs. Back then, it meant something. Coming from Albert now, it sounded like a warning. That night, I walked through the apartment like I was seeing it for the last time. The dent in the wall where Albert tripped chasing his toy fire truck. The scuff on the hallway baseboard from moving Nolan's recliner the week after he died. The window in the kitchen that always stuck halfway up. None of it was perfect, but it was mine. And someone had already started making plans for me to give it up. The scariest part wasn't that they were planning something behind my back. It was the way they wrapped every move in kindness, in care, in words like safe and comfortable and easy. That's what made it hard to fight. Because when someone smiles while they're steering your life in another direction, it gets harder to tell where love ends and control begins. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe my own son, the boy I raised, the boy I sat with through stomach flu nights and college rejection letters, would treat me like a burden to be relocated. But that folder said more than any smile ever could. They weren't suggesting anymore. They were setting the stage, and it was getting clearer that I wasn't meant to have a say in how the next act played out. A week later, Albert called and asked if he and Tilda could stop by. He said they had a few things to go over and promised it wouldn't take long. I knew what was coming, but I said yes anyway. It's hard to say no to your own child, even when you know something isn't right. They arrived the next afternoon, Ivy in tow. She ran in first, hugged me, then disappeared into the sewing room with her coloring book. Tilda smiled, too wide, and handed me a bag of fresh peaches. Albert got straight to it. We brought a couple of forms for you to look over, he said, laying a folder on the kitchen table like it was a delivery menu. Just basic stuff. Protective measures. We want to make sure everything's covered in case something happens. I didn't sit down. I stood at the counter, drying a mug. What kind of forms? He opened the folder and pointed as he spoke. This one's a financial power of attorney. That just lets me handle things if you're unable to. This one's healthcare proxy. Same idea if you're in the hospital and can't speak for yourself. This one's for property, mostly just prep for later to keep things smooth. Tilda added, most seniors have this done years ago. You're actually ahead of the game. She smiled again, like she was doing me a favor. I didn't move. Have these been looked over by a lawyer? Albert waved his hand. They're standard forms. I downloaded them from the legal site we use at work. I filled in your name. That's it. Your name and mine, I said, finally sitting. Tilda nudged a pen toward me. You don't have to do them all now, just the basics. Ivy's in the other room, and we're headed to a birthday party in an hour. So if we could get this done quickly, that'd be great. I looked down at the papers. My name was already printed at the top in blue ink. So was Albert's. I could feel the back of my neck get hot. You brought your daughter to rush me, I said quietly. Tilda blinked. What? You brought Ivy? So I'd feel pressured. So I wouldn't ask too many questions. Albert sighed. Mom, come on. We're just trying to help. Ivy's voice floated down the hall, singing to herself. I looked toward the sewing room, then back at the paper, then at my son. What happens if I don't sign them? I asked. Albert's jaw tightened just slightly. Then nothing changes. But it'll be harder down the line. For you. For us. Look, it's not about control. It's just planning. You've always been practical, Mom. He leaned in. You've got to trust me. And there it was again. That word. I picked up the pen. My hand shook just a little. I signed the first document, financial power of attorney, and stopped. The others I slid back into the folder. I'll look these over later, I said. Tilda opened her mouth, but Albert put a hand on her arm. He nodded. That's fine. Just let us know if you have questions. They didn't stay long after that. Ivy kissed me goodbye, and they walked out like nothing had happened. As soon as they left, I went to my room and pulled the sign page from the folder. I made a copy with the old scanner I kept in the closet and tucked the original deep into my dresser drawer under a pile of old sweaters. Then I picked up the phone. I hadn't spoken to Nancy Peterson in years. We met working at the same school. She was in the front office. I was in the library. After she retired, she went back to school and became a lawyer. Last I heard, she was doing something with elder law. I called her that evening. She answered on the third ring. Florence Brown, she said, laughing, I haven't heard your voice in over a decade. We caught up quickly. Then I told her about the folder, the pressure, the document I'd just signed. I need someone who knows what they're looking at, I said. You were always better with paperwork than I was. Can you scan it and send it to me? She asked. Don't wait. I emailed it right then. She called me back 20 minutes later. Flo, she said, her voice different now. Serious. This isn't routine. I thought it was just financial power of attorney. It is, but it's written in a way that gives Albert immediate authority. No trigger clause. No medical event required. He can act on your behalf now, including bank access, including property transactions. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed. I only signed one. Good, she said. We can work with that. But listen to me carefully. Do not sign anything else. Not without me reviewing it. And keep everything. Emails, texts, every interaction. You hear me? I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She paused, then asked, Flo, do you trust your son? I didn't answer right away. I trust who I raised. I said, I don't know if I trust who he's become. Nancy didn't push. She just said she'd look into some options and that she'd call again tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat on the couch with the lights off and listened to the silence of my apartment. I thought about how many hours I'd spent in that kitchen, making peanut butter sandwiches, brewing tea, folding laundry. How many late nights I'd stayed up waiting for Albert to come home safe. I never thought I'd be hiding paperwork from him, but now I had to, not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to protect myself from whatever version of him thought I didn't deserve a choice in my own life anymore. If this part made your chest tighten, you're not alone. How many times have we signed something we didn't fully trust just to keep the peace? Subscribe to her Kindle so stories like this remind you you're not invisible and you still have power. After I spoke to Nancy, I made a choice. I stopped pushing back. I stopped asking questions. I smiled more, nodded when they talked, and acted just confused enough to make them feel comfortable. Let them think they were winning. Nancy said we'd need more than a signed document to fight this. We needed proof. So she connected me with a private investigator named Ron Vasquez. He was in his 50s, former detective, quiet and observant. not the type to waste words. He came by late one morning while Albert was at work, and Tilda was probably off at one of her yoga classes. Ron installed a few small audio devices, one in the kitchen clock, another in a lamp near the couch, and a discreet camera in the hallway shelf tucked behind a decorative vase. They were small, nothing fancy, but enough to pick up voices. He said, "You just keep doing what you're doing. Be calm. Let them talk." I nodded. The next few weeks, I played the part. When Albert stopped by, I let him do most of the talking. I asked simple questions like, "Remind me again what that paper was," or "Where would I be moving to?" He'd slow down and speak like he was explaining things to a child. That part stung more than I expected. Tilda, on the other hand, was always a little too polite, always smiling, always carrying a paper or pamphlet. She'd touch my arm lightly and call me Flo, like we were lifelong friends. That woman knew exactly what she was doing. She began stopping by with a man named Victor. He was a realtor, young, neatly dressed, and clearly trying to stay professional. But I noticed the way he looked around the apartment, measuring spaces with his eyes. They never asked if I was ready to list the place. They talked like it had already been decided. One afternoon, I overheard Tilda in the kitchen with Victor while I was resting in the living room. She said, "It's just wasted space. 2 bedrooms, all this square footage. For one woman, she doesn't even use half of it anymore." Victor asked something I couldn't hear, and she answered, "No, she's not involved in the paperwork. Albert's handling all of that. It's just about timing now." That night, I listened to the recording with Ron. He paused it and said, "They're moving fast." I didn't say anything. I just stared at the wall, thinking of Nolan. He'd be livid if he were here. But I wasn't going to get angry. I was going to stay sharp. A few days later, Albert stopped by after work. He brought Thai takeout and acted like he was just checking in. We sat at the table, and I asked about Ivy's school like I wasn't holding on to the edge of every word he said. Then he leaned forward and said, "Mom, we've got a serious buyer." I looked up. "A buyer?" He nodded. "Yeah, Victor found someone interested in the place. Cash buyer. Wants to move quick. This could be really good for everyone." "For everyone?" I asked. Albert smiled like he was breaking good news. "Yeah, you'll get your new place. We'll help with moving. The extra cash can go toward your care. Medical needs. Anything. It's a smart move." He reached into his bag and pulled out a thin envelope. "We've already submitted preliminary paperwork to the HOA. They just need your signature to finalize things on their end." I didn't touch the envelope. Instead, I asked, "Does this new place have a porch?" He blinked. "What? You said I'd be moving. The studio. Does it have a porch?" He glanced away, then said, "I think there's a community patio." I nodded, pretending like that was good enough. Later that evening, I checked the HOA website. Sure enough, a transfer request had been submitted by Albert. My name was on it. His was listed as authorized agent. He didn't even mention it until everything was already moving. Ron and Nancy were tracking everything: emails, realtor communication, even Tilda's calls to the building manager. They'd already arranged one showing without telling me. When I confronted Victor the next day, he just looked uncomfortable and said, "Albert gave me access." They were treating me like a piece of property, not a person. One morning, I walked into the kitchen while Tilda was on the phone with someone. She didn't hear me at first. She said, "It's going to be such a relief once she's settled. I mean, honestly, it's time." She turned and froze when she saw me. I just smiled. "I was thinking of baking something today," I said. "You want to take a loaf home for Ivy?" Tilda's smile tightened. "That'd be lovely." I told Ron later that day. "They're not even hiding it anymore." The final straw came on a Tuesday afternoon when Albert met with Victor in my living room. I pretended to be reading in the bedroom while the hallway camera recorded every word. Victor said, "Does she know the place is being shown again this Friday?" Albert laughed softly. "She doesn't need to. My mom's getting forgetful. It's time. Forgetful. Not confused. Not distracted. Forgetful." That one word felt like a brick to the chest. I'd taught hundreds of students how to read over the years. I'd managed my own money since I was 24. I handled Nolan's estate when he passed. But to my own son, I was just an obstacle, an old woman too out of it to matter. That night, I sat in my chair with a cup of tea and stared out the window. They had already written the next chapter of my life without asking me if I wanted to be in it. I thought about the check Albert had mentioned last week, around $12,000, he said, as if that was a generous gift. The idea that I'd just walk away from the home Nolan and I built together for the price of a used car. That's when it became clear. This wasn't about concern. This was about convenience. And they were more than ready to move me out of the way. It was my neighbor, Ruth, who told me. I was watering my plants on the balcony when she leaned over from hers and said, "I heard your place sold already." That was fast. I nearly dropped the watering can. "What do you mean, sold?" She tilted her head, confused. "The guy with the clipboard was here this morning. Said he was finalizing things for the new owner. I thought you were moving." I forced a smile. "Oh yeah, it's just happening quicker than I expected." My stomach turned. I didn't call Albert. I didn't call Tilda. I waited. Sure enough, the next day they showed up. Both of them. No, Ivy this time. Albert walked in like he was on a schedule. He set an envelope on the table. "We wanted to talk you through everything." Tilda sat across from me, hands folded, eyes steady. Albert opened the envelope and slid out a check. $12,000. He placed it gently in front of me like it was a gift. "That's yours," he said. "We found a great studio in Tigard. It's quiet, well managed. One floor, right by the walking trail. You'll love it." I didn't speak. Tilda chimed in, "It's really perfect for you, Florence. Very low maintenance. New carpet. You'll be settled in no time." Albert added, "We've already started the moving process. The buyers are flexible, but they want to close by the end of the month." The end of the month. Just like that. I looked at the check again. $12,000. They'd sold my home for over $1 million and handed me 12. That's it. I asked, my voice flat. Albert blinked. "What? That's all I get?" He gave me a practiced smile. "It covers everything you'll need. The new unit is already arranged. You won't have to worry about a thing." I nodded slowly. "And the rest of the money?" "Well, technically, with the way the paperwork was filed, most of it went toward taxes, fees, and..." Tilda jumped in. "It's all above board. We worked really hard to make this smooth for you." Smooth. Like I was a box being shipped. I pushed the check back across the table. "I want to think about it," I said. Albert's face shifted, just a flicker of irritation. But he covered it. "Of course," he said. "But we should move quickly. The closing is nearly done." When they left, I didn't cry. I picked up the phone and called Nancy. Ron showed up an hour later. They both sat with me at the kitchen table as I explained what just happened. I handed them the check. Ron said nothing. Nancy opened her laptop. After a few clicks, she looked up. "I need to ask you something important," she said. "When Nolan passed, did you make any changes to the property title?" I nodded. I added his sister, Ruth Ann, as a contingent signature, just in case something ever happened to me. Nancy blinked. "You never removed her?" "No, it just slipped my mind. She lives in Idaho now. We haven't spoken in years." She smiled, the kind of smile that meant something unexpected had just gone in our favor. Well, then your son has a problem, because that sale isn't fully legal, not without her signature. I stared at her. What does that mean? It means the title transfer isn't valid. The escrow is likely still pending because the paperwork's incomplete. If we act now, we can put a hold on the sale. Ron leaned forward, and it gives us leverage. Big leverage. Nancy pulled up a draft letter she'd written earlier, just in case. She filled in a few blanks, printed it, and slid it across the table. It was a formal legal notice, intent to challenge the property transfer on grounds of fraudulent representation, elder coercion, and incomplete title authority. I signed it. The next morning, Nancy sent it to the buyer's attorney, the title company, the realtor, and the HOA. Within 24 hours, the sale was frozen. Albert called me that night. His voice was tight. "Mom, why did you file a dispute? What are you doing?" I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked, "Did you think I wouldn't find out you sold my home behind my back?" There was a long silence. Then he said, "We're trying to do what's best for you." I said, "No, you're doing what's easiest for you." He started to respond, but I cut him off. That $12,000 wasn't kindness, Albert. It was a hush payment, and I'm not cashing it. I hung up. That night, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the soft creak of the building settling in. I looked around at the walls Nolan painted, the curtains I hemmed myself, the floor Ivy used to crawl across. They tried to erase all of it with one quiet sale. But now, everything had changed, and they weren't the only ones with a plan. If you've ever felt insulted by a so-called gift that was really a payoff, then you need to subscribe to her Kindle, because we tell the stories they hope you'll keep quiet about. And if this feels personal, drop a "they didn't break me" in the comments right now. After the sale was frozen, everything moved fast. Nancy filed for a temporary injunction the next day, naming both Albert and Tilda. The claim was built on three things: title fraud, attempted financial abuse, and misrepresentation of authority. The real power came from that one detail: Ruth Ann's name still being on the title. Without her consent, nothing could legally go through. And that gave us just enough time to breathe and dig deeper. Ron pulled the thread. He got access to communications between Tilda and the buyer's agent. The emails painted a clear picture. Tilda had submitted clarified paperwork weeks earlier, documents that removed Ruth Ann's name and added Albert's signature under a section labeled sole heir and representative. The notary stamps looked real at first glance, but Ron spotted a detail. The notary ID number belonged to someone who hadn't renewed their license in 5 years. Tilda had forged it. Nancy looped in a contact from the state licensing board and flagged the entire file. Within 48 hours, the buyer's attorney called to threaten legal action for misrepresentation and breach of contract. Albert and Tilda were officially in trouble. But I didn't reach out. I didn't say a word. Instead, I let them believe they'd won. I let them plan. They told neighbors I'd be moving soon. Tilda sent out a group email about clearing the space and asked if anyone needed furniture before the movers came. Victor, the realtor, sent me a message asking if I'd prefer weekday or weekend pickup for my remaining items. I told Ron, let them keep talking. Albert's arrogance worked in our favor. He had no idea the sale had been halted, or that every step he took now was just more evidence we could use later. One afternoon, I went to see the studio apartment they picked for me. I asked Ron to drive me just to see it for myself. It was on the edge of Tigard, tucked behind a busy road beside a chain pharmacy and a tire shop. The building looked like a dentist's office. Clean, dull, forgettable. The woman at the desk handed me the key to Unit 204. The door stuck when I opened it. Inside was one long room with beige walls and a single window that faced a parking lot. The kitchenette was smaller than my hallway closet. The bathroom didn't even have a tub, just a cramped stand-up shower with a plastic curtain. There was no porch, no yard, no quiet, no light. I stood in the middle of the room and took a deep breath. The air smelled like dust and bleach. Tilda had called it a perfect fit. I whispered to myself, no one puts me in a corner with my name on a check. I left without taking a second look. Back home, Ron updated me on Albert and Tilda's next moves. They had already made a down payment on a 4-bedroom home in Lake Oswego. Bright blue siding, double garage, backyard with a playset. They'd started packing. Tilda had picked out paint samples. Albert forwarded school enrollment papers for Ivy to a private academy nearby. Tuition paid upfront with funds expected to clear within the week. The way Ron explained it, they weren't just confident. They were counting on it. They've already spent money they don't have, he said. That's going to hurt. I asked Nancy, can we let them go just a little further? She nodded. Let the damage stack. But be ready. The moment we move, it has to be clean. You'll only get one shot. So I waited. Albert called twice during that week. I didn't answer. Tilda left a message saying they were finalizing movers and hoped I'd come around soon. In the meantime, Nancy drafted the full complaint. It named both of them, with exhibits attached, copies of the forged documents, recordings of conversations, and sworn statements. Ron pulled the bank trail showing Albert transferring funds from the escrow account into a joint account used for their new mortgage approval. They were building their next life on money they weren't supposed to have. It was almost time. The day before the formal complaint was set to be filed, I sat on my couch and looked around the apartment, my apartment. The pictures still hung where Nolan had left them. Ivy's school photo was clipped to the fridge with a heart-shaped magnet. The carpet was still worn near the hallway, and the kitchen chair still wobbled if you leaned too far back. And I loved every inch of it. They wanted to shrink my life down to 4 beige walls and a kitchenette. They thought I'd accept it because I was old and quiet and alone. But they were wrong. I didn't need to raise my voice to fight back. I just needed to wait until they thought they'd already won. If someone's ever smiled while planning around you, share this video. Subscribe to her Kindle if you've ever been called confused just because you stood your ground. And if you won't hit that button, tell us why below. You'll find more women who've been exactly where you are. I picked the cafe on purpose. Small, local, and right off the main street in Milwaukee. The kind of place where people recognize you when you walk in. The waitress called me Miss Florence and always brought me a mug of chamomile before I even ordered. I wanted that place. I wanted the calm. I wanted the control. I asked Albert and Tilda to meet me there for lunch. I said I wanted to talk things over. They agreed without hesitation. I could hear the relief in Albert's voice. They showed up right on time, dressed sharp. Tilda had a folder in her hand. Albert looked confident. They thought I was ready to surrender, but I wasn't alone. Nancy came in with me, dressed simple, but sharp, legal pad under one arm, expression flat. Ron followed behind us quietly and took a seat near the door. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. He was just there in case anything turned sideways. We sat. I smiled. I didn't touch my tea. Albert looked uncomfortable now. He leaned in. Mom, it's good to see you. We're glad you came to your senses. Tilda added, we've been trying to support you this whole time, Florence. We just want the best for you. I nodded. I know. That's why I wanted to meet. So we could talk face to face before everything becomes permanent. Albert looked at me, confused. What do you mean? Nancy reached into her bag and placed a sealed envelope on the table. She slid it across, gently. "That," she said, "is a formal complaint, filed this morning. It outlines our charges: fraud, elder coercion, title tampering, misrepresentation, forged legal documents, and attempted financial abuse." Tilda didn't blink. She just let out a small laugh and said, "Is this a joke?" Nancy stayed still. "It's not." Albert reached for the envelope but didn't open it. I spoke up. "You sold my apartment without my permission. You forged papers. You listed me as forgetful to a realtor. You gave me $12,000 for a home worth over $1 million. Albert's face turned red. "That's not true. We were protecting you." Nancy cut him off. "We have audio recordings, emails, and transaction history. Everything's documented." Tilda leaned forward, her voice sharp now. "You recorded us. You spied on your own family." I looked her straight in the eye. "You took my trust and treated it like a loophole." The cafe had grown quiet. A couple nearby glanced over. I didn't care. Let them listen. Ron finally spoke. "Your escrow documents were incomplete. You misrepresented ownership. That puts the buyer at risk. They're already consulting a litigator." Albert looked stunned. "Wait, the buyer?" "Yes," Nancy said. "The buyer is furious. And that private school you enrolled Ivy in, they received notice this morning that the tuition check is being disputed because it was paid with money gained through fraud." Tilda's jaw dropped. Albert opened the envelope then. His hands were shaking. The pages spelled it all out in clean, black and white language. The final page included a cease and desist order and notice of intent to pursue civil charges if they continued any further with property transfer attempts. He looked up at me. "You would do this to your own son?" I leaned back in my chair. Calm, solid, clear. "You already did this to yourself." Tilda's voice rose. "We sacrificed so much for you. We've carried the burden of looking out for you. You don't even realize how lucky you are." "Lucky," I said softly. "To be lied to, manipulated, to be treated like a problem that needed to be solved." Albert ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, this is all just a misunderstanding. Let's slow down and talk privately." Ron stood then, slowly, just a quiet movement. No threat, no rush, just enough to remind them they weren't calling the shots. "I'm done talking in private," I said. "I'm done being polite while you try to erase me from my own life." They sat there, silent now. I sipped my tea. "You thought I'd roll over, that I'd be too tired, too old, too out of the loop to stop you. But you were wrong." I placed my napkin on the table and stood. "You stole from the wrong old woman. If you've ever stayed quiet when you should have spoken up, now's your moment to reclaim your voice. Subscribe to her Kindle and show the world older women don't vanish. We rise." Not ready to subscribe? That's okay, but we dare you to scroll down and say why. Someone out there needs to read your story too. Albert didn't move. Tilda stared at me, her face stiff and pale. I turned to walk away. At the door, I paused and looked back one last time. "You wanted me to disappear. Now you'll be remembered for what you did." I walked out into the daylight. My chest felt light, my legs steady. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. It's been almost a year now. I'm still here in the same apartment, the same place Nolan and I moved into when Albert was just a little boy. The sun still comes through the east-facing window every morning and warms up the hardwood floor. I still drink my tea at the same table where I once helped Albert with his homework. The only difference is me. Since everything happened, I've joined a local group that helps seniors understand their housing rights. We meet every second Thursday at the library downtown. Most of us aren't lawyers or experts, but we've all lived through something. A few of them have stories worse than mine. One woman's son tried to take out a second mortgage in her name. Another was nearly forced into a care home because her daughter wanted to rent out her house on Airbnb. It's heartbreaking what people think they can get away with when you're over a certain age. I tell them what I tell myself. You're not done just because the world thinks you're slowing down. You don't need to apologize for keeping what you've built. Nancy still checks in from time to time. The case was settled quietly. We agreed not to go public, mostly for Ivy's sake. The buyer backed out, and the sale was nullified. Tilda's forgery was flagged, but wasn't pursued criminally. Again, my call. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't about winning. It's about keeping your dignity. I chose peace over dragging it through court. As for Albert, we haven't spoken since that day at the cafe. Not even once. And I'm okay with that. I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel done. But Ivy surprised me. A few months ago, I got a letter in the mail. Her handwriting on the envelope was shaky but sweet. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper with purple ink. She apologized for not understanding what was going on. She said she missed me. She asked if I could meet her sometime. Just the two of us. That letter broke me in the best way. So we started meeting once a month at the park near my place. We sit on a bench and share cookies and talk about school and books. She still loves the same strawberry yogurt I used to keep in my fridge. She asked me once why I stopped coming around, and I told her gently, sometimes adults make choices that aren't fair, but that's never your fault. She nodded and leaned her head on my shoulder. We don't talk about her parents. Not yet. Maybe one day. But for now, I just show up for her. I think that's enough. The apartment feels different now. Not haunted, but lived in again. I've rearranged the furniture a bit, donated some old clothes. I even started baking again, something I hadn't done in years. I find comfort in the small things: warm bread, clean sheets, soft lighting in the evening. Most of all, I find comfort in knowing I didn't give up what was mine. It wasn't just about the square footage or the zip code. It wasn't even about the money. It was about something deeper, my place in this world, my story, my roots, my worth. There was a time during all this when I almost believed what they were telling me, that I was in the way, that I should step aside, that I didn't need much anymore. They spoke those words with smiles on their faces, but underneath was the message: you've had your time. That's the part that stings the most. But I didn't let them take it from me, and that changed everything. Now, every morning I pull back the curtains and look out at the Willamette River. The water moves slow and steady. I sit by the window with a cup of chamomile in hand and let the light fall across the table. Sometimes I think about Nolan. I think about how proud he would have been to see me stand my ground. He always said I had more grit than I gave myself credit for. And he was right. I kept what mattered. I let go of what didn't. I kept my home, my name, my voice. I let go of approval, of guilt, of the need to explain myself to people who chose selfishness over love. That's what it means to grow older with strength, not just surviving, but holding on to what is yours, especially when someone tries to take it. People think it's just bricks and paint, but your home holds your whole story. And when someone tries to take it, they're not just stealing a place. They're erasing your life. What would you have done if it were your child? Would you forgive them? Would you fight back? Let me know in the comments. If this story moved you, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a story like this again. We have more real-life stories coming soon, ones that stay with you long after they end. Thanks for being here.